Hey Dude,
The 90s Called,
with Christine Taylor and David Lascher.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Hey Dude, the 90s Called. I'm Christine Taylor.
And I'm David Lascher.
And what do we got today, David?
Oh, I have a big surprise for you.
What?
I don't know if you've heard of this guy or you might have met him, but we have actor, producer, director Ben Stiller on today.
What?
Yes, I pulled a lot of favors. It took a lot of work, but I got him.
You two have never even met and you booked Ben Stiller? Very impressive.
I am so excited. Honestly, I have never had this many notes on someone's work only in the 90s. I mean, literally, I just only rewatched his 90s work. And
I sort of peaked, I think, like 98, 99.
Oh, there he is.
He's here. He's here.
Jumped in the
Ben
intro.
Stiller.
Am I allowed to be here?
Yeah, you are. Thanks for coming, dude.
Thanks for joining us, Ben Stiller.
Hey, Christine, it's a chance to see you.
Yes,
because we're both running
good.
around doing things. So like to see you. At least
I love it.
We're not actually in the same place, but I can see you.
No, but I know where you're. I see where you are.
Yeah, you know where I am. I'm happy to be on your cool podcast. I'm a fan. I'm already a fan of this podcast.
Long-time listener?
I've listened to both episodes and like they both are really good. Like you guys are off to a great start. I feel like the reunion shows were like so, I mean, the White Squall thing, I just have to say, because I just finished listening to it.
So then you've listened to three.
Morning. Yeah, I listened and the intro one you guys did too. Yeah. Okay. But the White Squall one was so good. I had a similar experience to Christine, which I had realized I had never seen White Squall because whatever I was doing in, what was it, 96, whatever, 95, 96. Yeah. But I remember it. But then I was like, oh yeah, I don't think I actually saw it. And then I started listening to the podcast yesterday and at home last night. And it was like 11:30 at night. And I was like, I want to check out this movie. I just want to check out a little of this movie because the podcast was so good. It was so interesting listening to you guys talk. And then it was like cut to, 12:45. I'm like, I got to turn this off because I have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to work. The movie is so good. It's like a really good Ridley Scott movie. And like the conversation you guys had, first of all, you had Jeff Bridges on your podcast. Like, has he ever even done a podcast?
I don't think so, man. He showed up because we all showed up and he just wanted to see us all, I think.
But he was like, you guys were all incredible. It was so genuine listening to how you guys were connecting and that, and having had experiences of, doing a movie at a young age and that formative experience, but to hear you guys talking about it and with him, and then to be able to hear, I mean, I'm a huge Jeff Bridges fan. So just and I got to see him for a second the other night at a thing in LA when he got this Lifetime Achievement Award.
Right.
And in the hall, I like waved to him and he was so warm and nice. And I don't know him at all. I'm a huge fan. And then to hear the way he was, how generous, how much fun he was, how self-effacing, and just like that warmth, it was amazing. And you guys connecting and just you could really feel this experience that you all shared. I loved how everybody was talking. I mean, Ethan Embry's stories about taping drugs to his underside of his what was happening? Acid in Malta.
Have you ever done a 6-month shoot? I mean, it was.
That's a perfect segue, by the way. Perfect segue into some early 80s Ben Stiller work.
I never had an experience like that where the closest thing I had to that was probably the second movie I did was Empire of the Sun, the Steven Spielberg movie. And I had a really small part, but I got to go. I wasn't there the whole shoot because the whole shoot was maybe like 4 months, I think. But I got to go to Spain, which was the prisoner of war camp that they was supposed to be in Shanghai. And so I got that about a 2.5 month experience like that.
Yeah, that's a big production, man. Christian Bale.
Also being that age, and because I was like 20, 21 and seeing the scale of something like that and realizing also what you guys were talking about, like people don't really make movies like that anymore these days. I mean, a big budget where they're doing everything for real. This is pre CGI, really.
Yeah.
Right. And the movie making, that's what I was thinking watching White Squall. It's like, it's just the cinematography, the direction, the experience you guys were having on screen was so real because you guys were going through it. That kind of movie making, it just doesn't happen because of the way movies are made now, where most of that stuff is never done where you go to the Caribbean for 6 months or go to South Africa to get the big waves. It just doesn't happen like that because people don't really have the budgets for it anymore or take the time to do it that way. So you really feel the difference. It feels like a real movie.
And so different from your experience, that was our first experience on a real movie set. But I want to get into, your first movie. You got made yourself. You directed it. You starred in it. But let's go back before that. First of all, I want to say,
as much as we love you promoting the White Squall episode,
I'm just telling you, it was I didn't want to stop listening.
Yeah, we were so thrilled,
and I'm totally not biased. Okay, I'm not biased at all.
At all.
Ben, first of all, it's so nice to meet you. I've heard such amazing things about you over the years, and your kids, your family is beautiful. Your kids seem like amazing, talented, thoughtful young adults, and there's nothing more important than that. And you and Christine must be so proud. And that I just wanted to say that to you guys.
Thanks, man. Yeah,
thanks, David.
It's really nice to meet you too, because over the years I've heard the Hey Dude stories also, and and the dramas that went on, and all of it.
Set things straight. Ben, you had never heard of Hey Dude before in your life, right? Until you met me.
No,
you were not a Hey Dude watcher.
No, I think I was too old.
In your 20s. No,
yeah,
exactly.
But
yes.
I know what happened. It crept up slowly. One person came over to Christine, and then a month later or 6 months later, someone else. And you were like, what the fuck is Hey Dude? That's how it happened. My wife was like, what is this thing?
Yeah. And people like freaking out, like they're seeing Elvis, And right. With Christine also, I really knew her when I first met her. I knew her through the Brady Bunch movies.
Right.
She was the girl who did that incredible Marcia Brady.
Yes, and, you famously did not want to see me for the role because you thought I was too good a Marcia Brady impersonator, right?
I associated you with Marcia Brady, as a lot of people did, and you came in to read for after I was told I should read for this pilot we did.
They forced me on him. Yes.
Yeah, and I was won over. I was won over by your incredible charm and beauty and talent.
And that was in the 90s, but we'll get to that later.
That was like 99, right? Yeah,
that's a rough start to a relationship. Him not wanting to cast you and being forced to, and then look what happened.
Yeah, it worked out.
Ben, I have so many notes. I rewatched so much of your work. I just want to really talk about the 90s
I'm sorry.
stuff.
I feel like that nobody should have to do that.
No, dude, that's what makes this job so fun. Honestly, I got to rewatch the Ben Stiller show, and let's talk about
very 90s. Very 90s. Yeah.
Well, I think Reality Bites is a time capsule, but let's the Ben Stiller show. You had Judd Apatow, you had Bob Odenkirk. You had Dino. You surrounded yourself with this like all-star team of creative writers and performers. Andy Dick. How did you?
Janine Garofalo.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But like, where were you at that point? Because you're a young guy. No, we know you now as Ben Stiller, but at that point, to get that kind of people behind you, get a show on Fox. How did you do that?
It's a long story that I won't bore you with, but it was basically over the course of a number of years being in New York and trying to do my own thing, trying to figure out what I knew I wanted to make movies. I also knew I liked comedy. I knew I liked acting. I didn't know. I was trying to figure it out.
Did you do stand up or sketch or any of that
I never
stuff?
did stand up because it was too hard. I took a stand up class once at the Improv when I was like 16. They taught stand-up comedy. They had a class you could go to on like Saturday afternoons or something, and it was so terrifying to me. And it was really, I tried to do a bit about alternate side of the street parking in New York, which most people are listening to going, what the hell is he saying? And that's why the bit didn't really go over because it was a very specific thing to
very
New York.
inside.
Parking rules in New York. Yeah. I didn't quite get that you had to sort of like find universal concepts. But I wanted to do comedy, and but I also wanted to make movies, and I was trying to, I was kind of finding my way. And I started working with my buddy Jeff Kahn, who is a comedy writer who I met because I did a movie. I was starting to get like little parts in movies in the late 80s, like Empire of the Sun and Next of Kin with Patrick Swayze. I got these like little, like kind of like okay parts. But I had a lot of downtime because I wasn't really getting hired that much. And I started to make my own shorts. And Jeff Kahn and I met in Chicago through John Cusack. And we made a short called Elvis Stories that was people who claimed they had an experience with Elvis Presley. And we made it with my own money. I actually got some Chicago gangsters to back the movie, to invest in the movie. And I told them I'd sell it to Showtime, which never happened.
Are they going to call upon you for a favor at some point? Is it still you owe them?
I mean, I think they're in construction. Okay. I was going to say the name, but I never really made good on my promise, but I had this like VHS, kind of movie that I could take around. And Jeff and I moved in New York together and started doing a little act together. I think the closest thing to performing live and stand up was Jeff and I doing this act where we did characters and stuff. And we do it at the China Club in New York, like once a week, which the China Club on the Upper West Side of Manhattan was like a big thing in the 80s. And they did comedy every once in a while. And so that led to us getting a MTV opportunity because MTV was starting to do programming. And we did, they gave us like $10,000 to produce an hour of television. So we did that. And then that led to them giving us a series on MTV, which if we showed videos for half of it, we could do whatever we wanted. And that was at the time when they were just starting to experiment with, other types of programming. Anyway, that failed. And then people at Fox saw that. And we went out to LA and started to develop. They said, oh, this is funny. Maybe you want to develop a show for us. And it took about 3 years to get the show on the air. And then it lasted about 6 months and was canceled immediately. But the experience of doing it was so much fun. And those people weren't all stars, at the time. Those people were like, Judd was doing stand up at the Improv. Janine was too. They were like just people that we were, I met hanging out. We were all trying to just find work.
Right. But your ability to recognize talent, throughout your career. Yeah. No one knows who someone is until they come in and nail it.
Yeah. For me, it was more insecurity in that they said, okay, do you want to do a show? And I was like, yeah, that's great. And then I was like, all right, let me find some really talented people to bolster my whatever I do, because I didn't want to do it on my own. So let me find really funny people. And that's how, and Judd and I met in line at an Elvis Costello Unplugged concert in LA. And I thought he was really funny, but he was, like 23, I think. And I was like 26 or something,
Oh my God.
Yeah.
There were sketch comedy had been done, right? Living Color was already on, and obviously SNL, but your show was like, they were really like short films, and I don't know if you directed those, but it was something different. Yeah.
I loved SCTV when it came on the air. And that was for me where it wasn't really live in that they did a lot of parodies and they did sketches that there was no live audience for the most part. So I felt much more comfortable with that. And so if we're going to do a takeoff on a movie, like this will be fun because we can, it's a chance to like try to do like a Martin Scorsese movie or, try to do, A Few Good Men. Like how can we, we do a takeoff on that. And for me, it was like, okay, let's try to, mimic those shots. And it was almost a little bit like a film school for me. I used it as, that.
And yet you would merge multiple worlds together. So your Martin Scorsese was Eddie Munster.
Yeah, it was like if Eddie Munster starred in Cape Fear.
In Cape Fear.
Right. Yeah. And that was like, an
genius.
idea. It was like kind of like a Mad Magazine inspired, kind of tone, or, they were doing it. Mad TV was doing it at that time also. And, it was an SCTV, I think really for me did it the best. And that was kind of what we were just trying to be.
Yeah. I mean, you're playing Bono doing a bar mitzvah, and
there's so many great ones. I mean, there's real classics.
We had a great group of writers too, like you were saying, Dino Stamatopoulos and Brent Forrester and Judd and Jeff. And we were all like given this opportunity to kind of do whatever we wanted to do. And it was when Fox was sort of a fledgling network. They weren't even on full time. We had a crappy time slot. We were up against 60 Minutes. And so nobody was really watching. And we kind of just, did what we wanted. And then they kind of caught on to it and then said, oh, wait, you can't do that. Like we're actually, we want to really program something that people want to see. So it was this like sort of.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you won. You got canceled. You won the Emmy for best comedy. So
yes, that was it was
never heard
literally it was like 9 months after we were canceled, and by that point we'd kind of all moved on. So that was very surprising for everybody.
But what a great springboard for you. And what I want to go into Reality Bites, and before I talk about the movie and what it still holds up. It not only holds up, but I think a lot of your work gets better with age. Like something like White Squall. At the time, people were like, we opened against, the Chris Farley movie Black Sheep or whatever. But over time, people find your work. My 13-year-old saw me watching Permanent Midnight last night, and she goes,
"Oh wow,
that's Zoolander." And she goes, he's huge on TikTok.
Why is Zoolander shooting heroin? He's shooting heroin.
Yeah.
David, you really did a Ben Stiller marathon, it sounds like, yesterday.
Listen, I listen to Howard Stern interviews, and I honestly think he does his homework. And if you don't do it, then don't do it. But Reality Bites.
You're right. I mean, in terms of, I think that like when you do these things at the time, it's so contextualized with the opening weekend. I mean, we had that with Cable Guy. Cable Guy came out and tanked.
So good.
Yeah, but at the time, it was like it felt, like, oh, this is a huge disaster, and it's all contextualized. So I think it's really wonderful actually to be able to go back and even to hear you guys talking about Hey Dude and like these experiences. I have just not to bring up the White Squall again.
No, I agree. Podcast, what Jeff had to say. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, what Jeff said about like the experience of making the movie is almost like a snake shedding its skin to grow. Yes. And like the movie is what it is. I mean, that's so beautiful because ultimately that's what I felt over the years is we spend so much of our time doing this stuff, doing this work that, if you don't enjoy the process of it and really relish that, and for many years, I think I always was focused on the product, the finished product, and in a way, it kind of doesn't allow you to really enjoy the experience of making it. Like Cable Guy. Cable Guy was a great experience making it. Then it came out and it wasn't that well received at the time, but making it was really, really fun. But then afterwards, when it, didn't do well, I was like, oh gosh, like you don't even want to even think of that. Well, it was fun.
Or talk about it. You feel like you let people down. It's a disappointment.
Right. I was having too much fun making it,
Right.
But Reality Bites was one of those experiences too, where it was kind of all very new too, because it was the first movie, and the things that you don't know going in are sometimes, really helpful to not have had that experience because then you don't know what you're not supposed to do. At that time,
I mean, I know Quentin Tarantino had made Reservoir Dogs. I had a friend named Rob Weiss who made a movie called Amongst Friends, and it took all his friends and family to fund it. He shot it over the course of a year. And here are your first movie is a universal release. The soundtrack is I probably cost more than any other. I mean, the U2, All I Want Is You. I mean, amazing. And how did you get that movie made as a first-time director?
Well, I was really lucky that Danny DeVito and Stacey Sher and Michael Schamberg had a production company, and they had seen the Ben Stiller show and saw my reel, and they invited me to come talk to them. And Helen Childress, who had had been developing the script with. And Helen was writing this story about her life and her friends growing up in Houston. And they said, maybe this might be something that you might want to, direct. And like, what do you think? And we had this meeting, and Helen and I hit it off. And we started to talk about the script, and I gave her my, feedback on, because I was coming from very much the Michael character in Reality Bites. I was very much that guy. I was, I hadn't had that experience with my friends. I was the guy coming from New York who, I grew up in a showbiz family. And I don't think Michael did that, but like he just sort of like, I wanted to have that experience. I always felt like that character really wanted to have those
be a
friendships.
Part of that group. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He was a little bit on the outside. Exactly.
And I always felt like that. So we kind of just leaned into that, Helen and I, and we started I still have the tapes. Helen sent me recently the tapes of us improvising when we were rewriting the script. She was rewriting the script. We would improvise scenes. I'd be Michael, she'd be Lelena, and we would just go back and forth. And then she would go and, write a better version of what we had improvised in some cases. And it just became that character became kind of me, and that was the way I kind of figured out how to make the movie, because I was coming from my point of view and kind of trying to understand what these friends were and how I could be a part of it. So that was always for me the way I came at it. And it was really fun once we started making it. And of course, Winona was really the reason that the movie got made. I mean, and I really owe her a lot, because she took a chance on me. She was
wow.
what allowed the movie to be greenlit, really.
Did they always want you to act in it? Or was that came later?
I think they were okay with me acting in it. I think,
like, okay,
yeah,
fine.
Sure. Nobody was like clamoring to have Ben Stiller in a movie, but Danny just was such a great mentor as a director. Because he's such a great filmmaker, and he was so generous and supportive at being an actor director too. So he kind of, gave me the like the confidence to go and say, you could do this.
Yeah, absolutely. The film, it really is such a great movie about becoming a responsible adult, right? Your character and Ethan Hawke's character are, at opposite ends. And, Winona's character is like in the middle, and, you're like, yeah. I live in the real world, and it's about becoming. To me, it was about becoming a responsible adult while also not selling out all of your ideals.
Yeah, and I think at that time too, the landscape of what kids are coming out of college were entering into in the economic landscape.
Right, it was a recession, right?
Yeah, so not that much different than things are probably now too, but a very different, world. Pre-internet, but sort of like just on the edge of the internet, I guess. But pre-social media, and how you kind of like figured your way into being an adult, and having like the questions of like, what do you give up, hanging on to your artistic ideals, all those things, which I could really identify with, just what I was going through as I was trying to make my way. So and then Troy was like a real character that that Helen knew, and Ethan was Winona's idea. She said, like, you should meet Ethan Hawke. And I met Ethan, and I was really intimidated by him because he was super cool.
He's intense.
And I was like, all right, I guess this guy. And he's like, yeah. I think I could be Troy. And I was like, okay. And I felt like, whenever you can use the real energy that's there, and in terms of like the actual energy between people and actors, that I think that really, when it's just there in the DNA, it really helps things. And so it was really fun to do those scenes with him, because I think he was he just really was so right for that role at that time. I had great memories of making that movie. Yeah,
the casting was so perfect, and yeah, his line, all we need is $5, a cup of coffee, and a cigarette. Right. You almost believe him. You almost think that really is the happy life. The Jack Kerouac on the road type path. But yeah, that's the ideal. Of like, oh wow, if I could be that cool and be that guy, well, that's all I needed. Right. But where do you end up? Right. 10 years later, you're right.
You're still that guy. Right.
You're still that guy.
I feel like the real Troy like sued us or something. I think like for using his name. I'm not sure.
No.
I think there was something that happened.
Oh, so it was his actual name.
Yeah.
You didn't do a name change.
Well, that's Helen. I think she decided to use Troy Dyer as a real name.
Dude, he should have sued you if he didn't get the girl. He got the girl. He's the hero.
I know.
My gosh.
That's true.
So then, I guess got to go on to heavyweights. I mean,
well, yeah. What is that transition? You know, I know a lot of these movies. I know
that one's
I know
great.
this so well, but I've never really heard the in between moments of sort of how they came about. And I know you knew the Steve Brill. But
yeah, I sat with my agents and I said, look, what could be a great follow-up to my Michael Greats character in Reality Bites? I'll be a mean counselor at a camp that makes kids lose weight. No, it was it was all kind of, it literally was like one day Judd called me and said, I'm doing this movie with Steve Brill, this Disney movie, about this camp where these kids, go to lose weight. And there's like a mean villain character. Would you want to do it? And we just finished Reality Bites and it seemed like fun. And I couldn't believe Judd was
North Carolina, right?
Yeah, we shot in Asheville, North Carolina. But like, I couldn't believe that Judd was doing a Disney movie. And really to this day, that is not a Disney movie. The fact that Disney made that movie is just, I'm sure
Disney,
they don't even want to admit it exists.
Today.
Yeah, I don't even think it's on the queue. I don't know. Maybe it is, but like, it's not, you can't do that movie today, as probably a few other movies that were done. Yes. But it was fun because we just went down there and Steve and Judd and I, again, like kind of like off on our own in Asheville. Nobody was really paying attention. Judd was pretty amazing because at a young age, he had such a confidence and in his ideas. And which I think was so important because he would be like, yeah, that's funny. And then when he, the fact that he thought something was funny, for me, it's like, it was just sort of like, okay, if Judd thinks it's funny, let's go with it. And that's kind of part of doing this stuff is just like you take a chance, you go, okay, I'm going to go for it. And so we just kind of, we spent 6 weeks down there or something. And I made some great friends. One of my great friends of all time, Mickey Marino, who was my trainer on that movie, lived down there in East Flat Rock. We're still friends to this day. They had just shot Last of the Mohicans there, I think the year before, which was a movie I was and am obsessed with. I love that movie. So that was really exciting. And
your mom and dad.
And my parents, parents played my parents. And
we got to let our listeners know that Jerry Stiller and Ann Mira, one of the greatest comedy teams in the world, are Ben's parents. And
and we got to work together a bunch of times.
So awesome.
Zoolander and other movies. And but it was a really fun time doing heavyweights. It's fun too, like when, over the years that, there are like with Hey Dude, that people saw these movies at a certain age, they connect with them and they stay with you, so that's really great to feel that when people will come back and say, quote heavyweights or something. Cause
people are obsessed with heavyweights. People are obsessed and have also said that your Tony Perkis character is a little bit close or inspired White Goodman in Dodgeball.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Would you like to speak to that, Ben?
I don't have anything to say other than I don't have that much range.
Oh, did you play the same character twice?
White Goodman is sort of has a similar tone of voice. White Goodman has a mustache.
That's one
big difference. He's blonder hair. But that's about it.
Another theme, though, is that another one of your movies over time has grown and found an audience. And do you think it's great to look back on work, like we said, that could never be made today? You can't be shouting at a group of fat kids and shaming them. You couldn't make that movie today. That's probably why people appreciate it so much.
Yeah, I mean, that's a much more complicated question, I think, in terms of like what's okay and what's not okay. But at the time, for me, I'm very happy we made those movies because I think they were all made in a certain spirit, you know, and I think that's like the most important thing is when you're doing comedy and you're taking chances, you have to understand like where the joke is and what you're, you know, what you're intending and that it's meant in the right way. And so, so I felt like that with that movie and other movies too, like Tropic Thunder, which, you know, again, probably would not ever get past the development stage today. But the fact that they exist, I'm very happy they exist because I do think there is a freedom in them. And, you got to take those chances when you're doing comedy.
Yeah. I mean, comedy is the last place you could talk truth because if it's funny, it's funny. You know, I took my son to Chicago real quick, just on a tangent. And we visited a university. I took him to Second City and he had never seen a live sketch show. And there's a girl in the show who's like a female Chris Farley. And I mean, she's hilarious. And the one of the sketches was about her falling down and no one can help her get up. And my son, after we were laughing, and he turned to me and said, "Isn't she insulted? You know, that the sketch was making fun of her and her weight." And I, you know, something that I think is so great about your work is the vulnerability to be searching for the right word and never, stumbling on your dialogue, coming down with hair, you know, that's crazy, or there's no embarrassment.
Showing up in a Speedo, right?
Yeah, there's no humility.
But I have to say, when we were making those movies, which was a different time, really, you know, that was never even a question. Do you know what I mean? Like that wasn't a question, and you know, for better or for worse, and that allowed us the freedom to take those chances if you were willing to do it at the time. I didn't think about it a lot, you know. Again, sometimes, you know, that could also go the other way when you don't think about things, and you think back like, gosh, I was so not self-aware.
But what are you thinking? Just where's the funny?
Yes, exactly. Because there wasn't a concern that, you know. And by the way, you know, is very valid too now, but it wasn't there so that's, you know, the complicated question when we start to go back into history to try to like figure out, you know, what the context was at the time and how you now react to that or correct for it or not, you know. It's a very, you know, because at the time it wasn't even a question. And I think that allowed those movies to be what they are.
And I think people appreciate them more through the years because that type of work is not being done.
That's true. I mean,
everything's so
it is
safe.
true.
Yeah.
Flirting with Disaster. Can we just go into that? Was that David O. Russell's first movie?
It was David's. I think it was David's second movie. I think his first movie was Spanking the Monkey, and he was out of New York, and it was such a, and it was a very personal script for him too. But he and I did not know each other before then, and we're still friends to this day. I think he's an amazing filmmaker, and his his energy on set, what he puts out there, like he intentionally wants to create an atmosphere where there's energy and there's a certain amount of chaos, like sort of controlled chaos. And we had it on that set for sure. It was an amazing cast. Alan Alda, Lily Tomlin, Patricia Arquette, Josh Brolin, Richard Jenkins,
Taya
Leone.
Incredible.
Yeah,
but
amazing
then that
people.
Remind me, wasn't that one that you really went after? That you were not necessarily offered? Like you really had to go fight for that?
Yes.
Because I would like to. Yeah, I know. I do want to. I want to hear the story. Yeah, but I also want to hear the story because you have all of these success stories. I would like to hear a couple of the stories things you maybe auditioned for that didn't get. But I do want to hear you did fight for Flirting with Disaster. Yes.
Yeah, I had. It was a time. It was like what year was that? I think it was like 93 or 94, 95,
96.
So it was sort of like after Reality Bites, and Reality Bites, by the way, didn't like burn it up at the box office or anything. It was like, it did okay, but it wasn't like people were knocking down my door to star in movies. And I also wanted to direct too, and I went off and I was it was before Cable Guy. But I read that script and I thought, oh, this is really good. I read the same thing, honestly, with There's Something About Mary. I read that script and I kind of sort of like tried to get that role too.
By the way, two roles, your Flirting with Disaster role and There's Something About Mary. Like, I don't think anyone could imagine anyone in those leading roles other than you.
Well, I think that the Peter and Bobby Farrelly saw Flirting with Disaster, and that was what got me the opportunity to get into There's Something About Mary. But you know, I also, in between there, I think after Flirting, but before There's Something About Mary, I directed Cable Guy, which I told you, which was not really, again, not that well received. So there was like a period of time where it's just sort of like, I don't know, like I'm trying to figure out, you know, I auditioned, but you're talking about things I auditioned for that I didn't get. I mean, My Cousin Vinny, I tanked my fourth callback.
Oh, for Macchio's friend.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
The Mitchell Whitfield role.
Yeah.
And he did a great job with it.
The one you told us about the other night, David, Ben, and I showed our son Quinn Goodfellas for the first time. And we're watching the movie. We're like, Quinn has never seen it, loving it. We're enjoying it. And I know a lot of Ben's stories over the years. I know a lot of these stories. And he turns to us and says, oh, I auditioned for that part.
For Goodfellas? Which part? The young Henry Hill?
I auditioned for Henry Hill's brother in the wheelchair, Kevin Corrigan, who is when they're making
the pasta,
dinner.
That
the last sequence. Yeah, that's the part that I came close to getting.
Oh my!
I had a couple of callbacks for that.
And you met Scorsese for that, yes? Like
I auditioned.
You auditioned for yeah.
And then the other one that I got a callback before Empire of the Sun was Close Encounters, when I was like 10 or 11 years old, to play one of Richard Dreyfuss's sons in Close Encounters. And I remember going to the Sherry Netherland Hotel and having to do and Steven Spielberg saying, like, I'd like you to do an improv. You pretend you have a cold and you don't want to go to school and you're trying to get your parents not, you know, to let you stay home. So you did the audition circuit. You knew how to go into a room as an actor. You started really young too, David. So you know what that is. I didn't like really get jobs as you know until I was older, but never booked a commercial ever in my life. I went in on a few of those. I was just not the type.
You also just told me recently all of these things as we started talking about the podcast. I was like, I want to know stories that I don't know about you, Ben. And then we started talking about that Goodfellas story. And you said, yeah, you know, didn't I tell you this story? I also read with Al Pacino.
Yes,
author. I was like,
author.
You just don't like to talk about the things you didn't.
Oh my God!
Well, you blocked them out. There was a movie called White Palace that James Spader did with Susan Sarandon. I read with her, got close on that, and didn't get it. So yeah, there were definitely the jobs that I would definitely get nervous at the final callback and not do well. That was sort of my MO.
We all did, but you were getting close. You were reading with Pacino and with Sarandon.
Yes. Yeah.
That brings me to a point about a trend that I think Reality Bites started, which was actors taking their work into their own hands or taking power over their own work. Because a couple years later, Jon Favreau wrote Swingers for him and his buddy Vince Vaughn. And a couple years after that, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck wrote Good Will Hunting for themselves to star. And they were just like, fuck the auditions, man. You know, like, and I feel like Reality Bites set that in motion.
Yeah. And I was sent the Good Will Hunting script to consider directing, but I was told the two actors who wrote it were attached. And I said, I'm not interested.
Okay. So never mind.
That's my showbiz sense there. That's,
that's such a good one.
And Gus Van Sant said, I'll do it.
Gus Van who? Yeah. Good luck with that.
And we just rewatched that one as well with our son, and you watched that movie and you said what he did with that movie was
God,
incredible. Yeah.
But I mean, I think
no, but what you're talking about is, for me, was just like not when there wasn't work happening, and I'm sure that's how it happened for anybody who was self-generating. It's like you either have a something that you want to say, or you want to try to create something while you're sitting around there waiting for somebody to hire you. So like you just start to make your own stuff. And
I think, listen, I think a lot of actors sit there and wait for the phone to ring, and they're beholden to an agent or a manager. And this is a great message to people that are starting out. You know, you don't have to sit there between calls. You have something to say. You know, guys like Ben were going on auditions, getting close, not getting them, and said, fuck it, I'm going to make my own show. I'm going to make my own movie. So
yeah. You just create. And I think even if it doesn't lead to something directly out of what you've made, it's still by creating and by putting out that positive energy, and you learn from it. You learn, you make something. And then every time I go out and direct or do anything creative, I always feel like I'm learning. I look at it as a learning experience, and that's kind of just, I think, part of what it is to be a person who's creative. You're always constantly trying to get closer to what it is you want to understand, how to make what it is that you want to express and how to get closer to that. So it's only positive to do that, I think. Like
the Zoolander short that you did. I mean, just so people know, it's not a waste of time to go out and just make your own short film. What was the Derek Zoolander male model short film that you did?
Well, that was made for the VH1 Fashion Awards in 1990. What, 96, 97?
96.
No, it was 97. Yeah, 96, 97, 98, because we did it twice. I remember because I did it the second time, and it was written by Drake Sather, who was an amazing stand-up comedian, who basically like had been tasked to write these little interstitials for the Fashion Awards of like, hey, let's do a little short about a photographer, a fashion photographer. Let's do one about a publicist. Let's do one about a male model. And they called me up and said, do you want to be the male model? And I was like, that's ridiculous. They're like, yeah, that's why we want to do it. And
therein lies the comedy.
And I remember the second one we did for this, I had a goatee because I was shooting a movie where I had a goatee in 90. It was like 97, I think. And then, it took a few years, but I thought it would be a movie. It could be a movie. I'd seen Austin Powers and saw what Mike Myers did, and I was like, "That's great. Maybe this Zoolander character could have his own movie too." And Mike DeLuca, who was at New Line, he was running New Line Studios at the time, said you should do that. And it was owned by Paramount, though, so we went to Paramount, and they didn't quite know what it was because Paramount was owned by Viacom, the corporation that owned VH1. So that's they owned it. So we developed it for them, but they didn't even know what it was. And
so you only had one place you could even take the movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then we finally, I mean, that took a few years too. I mean, one of the things I think of these processes, they do take time sometimes, and just like the commitment level over years, I think, it's hard sometimes because you think, well, you want this stuff to kind of happen. And I would just think if I was starting out, you want everything to happen and happen quickly, but it's sometimes it's just like a lot of work over a long time.
Yeah. But the short that you did for VH1 turned into a series of movies that, Christine was asked the other day, when's number 3 coming?
I don't think number 3 is coming.
She said he waits 10 years between them.
Yeah. Well, what I said, which is, David, you spoke to this a little bit earlier, was that with time, these movies get a life of their own. And we've shared before that the first Zoolander came out right after 9/11, and people weren't necessarily flocking to theaters at that point. So it wasn't like it was a big box office smash, but then it kind of
had its own life.
And then so you make Zoolander 2, and again, people wanted to see more Zoolander, but not quite at that time.
Right, and now in 2023, my 13-year-old sees Ben's face and goes, "Oh, there's Zoolander. He's on TikTok."
Exactly, and we're on course for Zoolander for me to be 70 when it comes out. So
2050
once every
something.
12 years. Yeah.
I feel like Zoolander, he never really goes away. He's around. It's just there might not be a full-length feature, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing. People want their Zoolander the way they want him. So I just I don't get into it anymore. I just sort of like let them sort of like, okay, that's nice. I'm glad you appreciate him. He's never seemed to be appreciated when he actually decides to make a movie.
Let them miss you. Let them miss you.
Let them
and
want
go,
you in 10
exactly.
years. Yes. You're always ahead of your time.
Can we talk about the cable guy real quick? This is the next on my list. First of all, how did you come to direct that movie? How come you didn't play the Broderick role? And Jim Carrey is a nuclear bomb of comedy.
Oh my God.
How was it working with him and making such a dark film? It's really dark.
Yeah. I mean, again, Judd Apatow, I owe it all to Judd. He came to me.
Oh my God.
This was, post whatever, doing, like trying to figure out what I was doing as an actor, director. And they had been developing it for Chris Farley, and Chris dropped out of it. And Judd said, Jim wants to do it. And I think Judd suggested to Jim, well, why don't we get Ben to direct it? And I just thought, I was this big Jim fan, and I knew what the character was and I knew how deep he would go with it, because he was just so, like, at that moment in time, Jim really just like, could do anything, and people, it was just like, he was like a phenomenon. Like, there's really, you don't see anymore, in terms of the way that like a movie star could really, I think, culturally sort of make an impact, because there's so much other stuff going on now. But what Jim was doing was just, he was like, and he was fearless, and he was like, I want to do this, and I want to do it with Judd and Ben, and let's make it this weird, dark, like, let's do, like The Tenant, only a comedy, and or Repulsion, but it's funny. And
it's a horror movie and a comedy all at once.
Yeah. And it was, really Judd who dug into the script, and we had a great time doing it, like I said, because Jim really was, and really, I didn't want to act in it. I really was excited that Matthew wanted to do it, because I really felt like that energy, again, like, you talk about sort of like the natural energy of two human beings, just Jim and Matthew. It was just so fun to watch, because I think Matthew was looking at Jim like, what the hell is this creature? What is he doing? And he watched, so, and he was smart enough, Matthew, to understand that he could use that in the movie. We were kind of left to our own devices, even though it was this big budget, movie. They kind of just let us do whatever we wanted, because Jim could do that. And then when the movie came out, they were like, what the hell is this? Because they were like, this is a really dark, and this doesn't seem like a summer movie. And like, well, this is what we've been doing the whole time. And I think they wanted to will it to be a summer movie. But, nowadays, if it was made, it would definitely not be marketed that way.
It definitely wasn't Ace Ventura or The Mask. It was.
No, it's like about a guy who's like a super lonely guy who, just, is desperate for a friend. And I think also Judd and I were kind of working in our sort of like relationship issues, because we both had been in relationships where we'd broken up and had that time of pain where where you're like just wanting to be with that person. And we both had been in that world recently, so we both kind of infused that into Matthew's character. The vulnerability,
where he was lonely as well, right?
Which is the vulnerability of when you're like, when your world falls apart because your relationship breaks up, and then all of a sudden you have like room in your life for some person to come in and and fill that void.
Yeah, we've all had we've all had friends like that are a little clingy, and you want to be polite, and maybe you you agree to hang out with them, and they run with it, and this is as bad as it could get. But yeah, Jim was just did you allow him to just go off and improv?
Yeah, I wasn't going to, I wasn't going to go in there and sort of like try to, I mean, it's an interesting thing when you're directing somebody like that, because, you're trying to like basically present in the movie, what's going to work best for the movie. So you want him to bring, the best version of himself to that movie. But then at the same time, you also want it to work for the film. And sometimes as an actor who is that unique and also like, honestly, that powerful at that moment, it's his choice really to even to hire me to direct the movie. So, I guess you could like sort of, liken it to like, like a star NBA player who then hires a coach.
Oh, that's a dangerous place to be, though,
yeah,
right?
And it's right because, then the question is, okay, well, how do we collaborate on this?
Right.
And I think the great thing about that situation was it wasn't like that at all, because Jim was so into, I think because he and Judd knew each other really well, because Judd had written Jim's specials for him and he really trusted him. And I think Judd saying like, I think Ben would be great for this, because Jim and I didn't know each other before that, but we all sort of clicked on set. And I think I got excited by the stuff that he was doing. And then it sort of inspired me to kind of want to figure out how to make set pieces around it. And then the other aspect of it, of sort of like coming from, the Matthews character's point of view of the reaction and sort of the feeling of like, okay, there's a sort of like deadpan humor that's happening of a person just watching this insane character. So that combination of that relationship comedy, and then also Jim doing this kind of crazy broad stuff, and then trying to take some genre elements of, of these sort of like dark, kind of horror movie, like not even horror movies, but more the, these bad relationship movies that there were a lot of in that era, single white female. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Pacific Heights, Michael
Fatal
Keaton.
Attraction.
Fatal Attraction. Right. Pacific Heights,
Talented Mr. Ripley was maybe after.
That was after, but it was a very much a genre at the time. So it was fun to kind of lean into that, and I think the movie just has its own weird tone because of that.
And the other thing too, though, David, I don't know if you watched it recently, but another great, Ben, is that you cast in that movie in supporting roles Jack Black.
Yes,
right?
I did notice that.
Owen Wilson, coming right off of Bottle Rocket, right? Was that, did they audition or did you just handpick those because you knew their comedy and their smaller roles?
Well, Owen definitely auditioned because Owen was in Bottle Rocket, which hadn't come out yet. And there was a short of Bottle Rocket that Wes Anderson had made, a black and white short. And it was making the rounds in LA, and the casting directors knew it. And the casting director said, "Oh, you should check out this short." And I watched it. And so Owen came in, Luke came in for it. And Owen came in an audition and did what I thought was a really mediocre audition. He was stiff. He was kind of didn't really commit. And I was like, this guy is not really bringing it in the audition. And the short was amazing. He was amazing in the short. I was like, this guy, Owen guy is hilarious. And he came in and didn't knock me out. Right. And I was nervous as a director because I was like, I don't know. And Judd's like, you got to hire that guy. That guy's hilarious. And I'm like, all right, I just don't know. He's like, come on. The guy's like, that's why Judd is Judd too, because he's amazing at casting. But he had the confidence that Owen would bring it. And then Owen came, and the day that he shot his scene, I literally I fell in love with him because I was like, because it all started to come out, and I saw this tone that he had, which was just like, that's Owen Wilson, like being Owen Wilson. But it was the first time I was ever experiencing it. And it was almost like he was in his own movie, which eventually that's what he started to do. But I felt like he just had his own thing going, and I had so much fun with him. And then Bottle Rocket came out, the movie, the feature came out while we were shooting. And I remember going to Century City by myself and watching Bottle Rocket and laughing. Like 5 minutes in, I started laughing and didn't stop laughing the whole movie. And we've been friends ever since.
Yeah. Thank God you hired him.
Many collaborations after that.
Well, thank God Judd said, just go ahead and do it. And by the way, I wish I'd had somebody like Judd telling people to hire me in my bad auditions.
Everyone needs a Judd in their life,
yes,
like
sure.
a good luck charm.
No, he's amazing because he really does see talent, and he also loves supporting talent and finding ways to unlock talent.
He really does. Look how many of his friends he's produced their movies. It's really amazing. Let's go to 1998 because you talk about Jim Carrey having this amazing range, right? So he did these Ace Ventura and all these crazy comedies, and then he does The Truman Show. But you're going from There's Something About Mary, which is one of the most slapstick, ridiculous and successful comedies of all time and doing Permanent Midnight the same year. How did that happen?
Yeah, that was a year. I mean, I remember this year well because I did 4 movies that year. It was 1997. The movies came out in 1998, but I did Zero Effect that Jake Kasdan directed, which is a very hardly
Pullman.
anybody. Yeah, it's a really great movie. It was Jake's first movie. Bill Pullman stars as this detective, this really kind of very odd private detective, and Jake cast me in that as his sidekick. And I remember doing that movie and then doing Permanent Midnight and then going off to do this Neil LaBute movie, Your Friends and Neighbors, with Jason Patric and Amy Brennan and a bunch of people, and then doing There's Something About Mary. So I remember that year, I was like, oh, wow, I'm like working as an actor. But
simple as that.
But it was like, but you know, none of those movies had come out. It was just sort of, I went from that movie to movie. And I remember thinking, oh, this is really fun. And I remember when I read There's Something About Mary, I just thought, oh, this script is really, really funny. And it'll either be incredibly great or it'll be awful. You know, it'll just go either way. But I remember telling my agent, like, I'd love it if I, like, can they consider me for it? Would they? And it was a little bit of a uphill battle, but they gave me the shot to do it. And so that was what happened. And then those movies, you know, next year came out, and really the only movie that anybody really saw that year was There's Something About Mary, because it was a big hit, but I'd done all the other movies too that year.
Well, that was more than just a big hit. I mean, that was a phenomenon. I mean, that was, when you talk about, it was, no one had seen a comedy like that ever.
Right.
I mean, that pushed all envelopes. I mean, I remember, we didn't know each other then, but I remember sitting in a movie theater, a packed audience, that kind of movie where drink is coming out of your nose, you're laughing so hard. Like
it doesn't
really stop. Uproarious laughter. And that really was like, it just was a phenomenon. I mean, it had to have changed everything for you instantly when that came out.
It did. It did. You know, it didn't open that big. Interestingly, it didn't.
That's right. It grew, right?
It didn't become a #1 movie until 9 weeks into the run, I believe.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I might not have that exactly right, but I remember the Tom Rothman, who was the head of Fox at the time, calling me into his office a few like 2 months after the movie came out and showing me a chart and saying, this is what's happening with this movie. And he showed me, like, each week it like getting bigger and bigger in terms of he goes, usually it's the other way around, but it was a movie that, and by the way, that couldn't happen today too, because movies just don't have a chance to stay in the theaters that long to grow. I mean, they're gone. But it was a very different time where a movie could actually build word of mouth and get to a point. So by the end of the summer, everybody had seen the movie. And it was obviously like really exciting, but I'd also been around for a while doing stuff. So I was like,
been around.
I remember people calling me up saying, like,
audition for Close Encounters.
Yeah, exactly. So I remember people calling me up saying, like, I knew it was going to happen for you. I knew it. And I thought it already did happen for me. I thought I was doing all right, because I really felt like that. I was like, I was happy with my career. And then it was like, oh, wait, but you're now in a movie that actually made money. And I realized, up to this point, nothing I'd done had made any money for anybody.
Oh, it's a business.
Yeah, exactly.
Shit, nobody told me that.
Who knew?
No,
it's pretty funny.
The movie has such broad comedic. I mean, it goes farther than anything I've ever seen, but like little things where you call Brett Favre Brett Favre.
Yeah.
Was that improvised?
Yeah, that was improvised. Just because I didn't know how
the funniest moment in the movie to me.
I just didn't know how to pronounce his name.
Nobody did.
Yeah.
Where's the beef?
I was probably a little bit of a pain to the Farrellys when we were making the movie, because I kept on being like the logic police and thinking, like, this is so broad, because it was definitely not my tone, like in terms of like what I thought. I was like, this movie is really funny, but it's crazy and it's a little over the top, and like it's only going to be funny if it's like believable on some level. So I always kept on trying to be like real and believable.
What? Like, how does your semen end up on your ear and in her hair?
Yes, exactly.
How is that possible?
No, I literally kept talking to them and saying, Look, I would feel this on my earlobe. I think we need to have a backstory where like Ted like lost the feeling in his ear when he was a child, and so like we established that he has a numb earlobe.
Oh my!
And they
God.
were like, just look at me like,
Shut
no,
up.
yeah, shut up. And so, stuff like that. And they'd also like hire their friends, and they were like just having so much fun, and they were so happy. And I come from like the much more stressful, moody, like if you're having fun, it's not good.
Right. It's a neurotic New York mentality.
It's a Jewish thing. It's like it's in the blood, but it's, and the Farrellys were like, this is great. We're having look at this. Look at this, how ridiculous this is. And then we got our buddy doing the, playing the cop and, all and I was like, all right. And I remember thinking like, am I in like a Marx Brothers movie? Like the scene where like, where I'm stuck in the zipper and like there's like a window and people start coming out. I'm like, this is literally like a sketch on like the Carol Burnett show or something.
Oh my God. And her brother screaming,
so funny.
Franks and beans, Franks and beans. It's seriously one of the funniest scenes ever. They knew what they knew what they were doing.
They knew what they were doing.
Permanent Midnight. What attracted you to that? I mean, that is one of the darkest stories I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, I got that script, and this was before doing There's Something About Mary, where this story about a comedy writer, Jerry Stahl wrote this story about being a comedy writer in LA, true story, a memoir, and being a heroin addict, but also kind of like going through the Hollywood experience of being a writer and setting up shows. And he worked on Alf as a staff writer. And it was just something about it to me felt very, very, I guess in my bones, I felt like I understand this world. And then this idea, not having ever been a heroin addict, but like the idea of, what he was carrying around with him. It was obviously a challenge. And I met Jerry and the movie wasn't set up. And Jerry and I just had a lot in common. And we bonded and spent about 9 months hanging out with each other. In that time, they were trying to get the movie set up. It was made for nothing. And they finally got the movie set up, and we'd known each other for that long. And by that time, I'd done all this research with him and hung out with him and, really tried to like do him. I was just trying to like, because Jerry is a really like very serious guy, and he's got a real specific sort of way that he speaks and really dry sense of humor. So it was really fun to just like kind of delve into that for me. I mean, it was definitely like an all-in thing. When I say fun, the shoot itself wasn't necessarily fun, but it was a very short shoot too. I think it was like a 4-day shoot or something like that. And then, Owen was in it too. And it was just a different world, but yet it also was kind of a very familiar world to me too.
It's just such a crazy story. The stories of addiction really get to me, especially when the addiction, destroys potential and opportunity. And I mean, this guy, he was functioning as highly as he possibly could while doing crazy amounts of heroin, which you played unbelievably. I mean, I like I said, I got to hang out with Jerry and talk to him about it a lot. And I think there are other, actors in that movie too. Peter Green was in it, was really, really good in that too.
And Jerry was Ben's best man at our wedding. Also,
yeah.
So he's still in our life. Yes.
He's one of my. Jerry's like one of my best friends. Yeah, if not my best friend. Yeah.
Thank God
we've had a lot of crazy experiences together. Yeah. But I mean, look, in terms of like stories about addiction, at the heart of them, there's stories about people who are trying to cope with life. And so to me, it's, the underlying causes of the addiction is a symptom. And I think, he had a lot of issues that he grew up with in his life. And being a comedy writer, I think, it's a lot of that pain is expressed, through comedy. And that's always been, I think, a through line. Yeah.
Well, the paradox, he's doing wheatgrass shots and eating organic while
running miles while he's right.
Oh my God.
Well, that's the denial of it all, but also like living the LA lifestyle too.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say only in LA. You should and drinking wheatgrass.
And also like the reality of, in show businesses, people will sort of tolerate whatever it is because people are, selfishly trying to, get whatever show set up or movie made, or like, talent. Sometimes people will indulge people who are talented because they just really, want to get the product out, which is kind of a sad thing and part of the reality of show business, I think.
Yeah. I mean, he has a line where he says, I came out here to pursue my art, and he's writing on Alf, and
right. Well, that's the other thing. I mean, yeah, the world of, which, I know, because you acted in them, but like the sitcom world where it's like nobody wants to know anything other than the reality of that show. Right. I mean, you do like the read through and everybody's laughing at the read through. And it's kind of like this sort of, this created world that functions in its own way. So there's not really room for people to then like to screw up in their lives, or if they are, nobody wants to hear about it. Also, my mom was on Alf too as a semi-regular, so I had that connection with it.
Oh my God, I didn't know that. Let's just go quickly to Meet the Parents because we're running out of time. I don't want to keep you much longer.
I have time. I'm happy doing this. I'd rather be doing this than stressing over the scripts on our show right now.
Okay.
Well, we should tell the listeners just you're working on Severance season 2, so you do have to get back to work. But yes, talk about Meet the Parents because this was also during the period of time that we.
I just want to we're still in the 90s, by the way. Like this is really I feel like I'm such a prime candidate as a guest on the show because we're still in the 90s. This is like the bulk of my career.
I have to say, just going through your 90s work, I don't know. We're trying to get into the mind of someone who could be that prolific.
I think I peaked in 99. I'm telling you.
No, there's
maybe 2000.
Two more decades of work that we have to get to.
I think the
you're
aughts.
Still
I think
rising,
the aughts,
dude. You're rising.
David, on our spin-off podcast, the early 2000s, we'll get into the next chunk of work.
Right, we'll have him on again.
But by the way, I just want to say the 90s were I have such great memories of that time. I guess because of doing all this stuff. And, it's when I met Christine and the fun we had, and the friend groups and being that age then. And, I was thinking that when you guys were talking on the White Squall one, but just those experiences you have at that age are so formative. I was in my 30s, I guess, in the 90s into the 2000s, so or late 20s into 30s, so it was such a fun time. And in terms of music and what was creatively television, movies were still movies, and it was just it was I have great memories.
There were events. We couldn't watch movies on our phones at that period of time.
We weren't all separated and staring at screens.
It's a different experience.
How did you guys meet? I need to ask this. How did you guys meet in the 90s?
So it was doing this pilot called Heat, Vision, and Jack, starring Jack Black and Owen Wilson for the Fox Network. And
Don't tell me that show didn't go with those two.
You are correct, David. It did not go.
Yeah, they did not want to.
10 years ahead of its time. This is a theme.
Get that executive on the phone right now.
It was the same Fox. It was Fox who had canceled the Ben Stiller show, and then I think it was 5 years later. It was hey, I'm going to direct something else for you guys. Yeah, we don't want that.
You should have known.
But it was Jack Black starring as an astronaut who flew. It was Rob Schraub and Dan Harmon created it. An astronaut who flew too close to the sun, and when when the sun rises, he becomes the smartest man in the world, and when it sets, he becomes a normal human being. And it was
he has a talking motorcycle.
That
is Owen Wilson. It was a little Star Trek.
That's a little out there, I gotta say.
Meets Knight Rider, right?
Yeah, it's like $6 Million Man meets Knight Rider meets Star Trek. And Christine was cast reluctantly by me as the hot sheriff. Yeah, she was the sexy sheriff that he has his sort of weekly.
Jack and I had an on-screen
romance
kiss.
With. Yeah.
Yes.
Every week it's a new adventure, and she was sort of the adventure in the pilot, and and she doubts his powers, and it was really fun, and we had a fun time making the show, and then Christine and I connected, and then I went off to do a movie in New York, and I invited her to come hang out.
Yeah, you were doing Keeping the Faith, and we were both each other's, I would say, like sort of rebound relationship a little bit at that time.
We weren't taking it seriously, for sure.
We were having fun, and you got to New York to start shooting this film, and you called me a couple days later and said, you want to come to New York and hang out? And I ended up going and staying the entire summer. And
which was great.
Then
I was like, oh my God, she has like all these cool friends. And
my brother, Brian Taylor.
Your brother.
A shout out to Brian Taylor.
Oh, Brian.
Yeah. And that was it. And then like we started, I guess we got engaged around when I was shooting Meet the Parents, right?
Well, that was sort of the life imitating art moment. It was really, you were sort of planning a proposal to me while you were shooting, unbeknownst to me, while you were shooting Meet the Parents.
About a guy about to get married.
Yes, and he had to find a time to, you wanted to find a time to ask my dad and tell my dad about it. I know.
Yeah, and it was it was at your grandfather's funeral. We went back to Allentown, and Christine's dad had a security company and still does. And so it was kind of this weird parallel. He was very much like the Robert De Niro character.
Yeah, Skip was a little intimidating.
Yes, right? You know Skip.
Yeah, Joan.
Hi, Dad, I know you're listening.
How did you
were
do
not
Joan?
Intimidating.
You and Joan got along together?
Oh my God. Is there a sweeter person on the planet?
I mean, if she approves of you, which she did approve of you.
Oh, I've never seen her disapprove of someone.
I haven't either, but I've heard. Like she has a high bar for her daughter.
Can she get nasty? Oh, okay.
No, just very protective. Just a little protective.
Yeah, like a mama bear.
That was our story.
We got engaged during Meet the Parents and then got married. Yeah, right after that.
So Meet the Parents. So how was it working with De Niro? I mean, it must have, I'm sure you've been asked this a million times. You probably don't want to say it again, but like, what was it like for you? It had to be crazy.
I mean, it was kind of mind blowing because I got this call from Jay Roach, the director who had directed Austin Powers.
Yep.
And I didn't really know Jay, but it was this, like all of a sudden, I guess after There's Something About Mary, people were calling and asking if I wanted to be in movies, which was just a new experience after, not that I hadn't been, shut out, but it was, just different. And Jay said, hey, we got this movie, Meet the Parents, and you'd be you and Robert De Niro. And I said, well, me and Robert De Niro. I'm like, did you talk to Robert De Niro about this? Does he want to actually do this movie? I'm like, yeah, he's totally good. He wants to do it with you. I was like, what? I couldn't. I was really like, I had trouble believing that that he actually would say yes to doing a movie with me, and because he's one of my favorite actors of all time. So it was really exciting, and I don't think I ever got over it, even working with him on the first one, because there was that intimidation factor that was there from the beginning that he definitely allowed to be there, and he He definitely, knew instinctually that it was good for me to be intimidated by him. And he was always really nice. But, to this day, I don't even really we're friendly, but I never felt like, I could pal around. I've gone out to dinner with him a few times, had some drinks in the past. And, where I've been kind of fanned out on him and regretted it the next day.
But on set, he was a giving actor, personable, and he was there. I mean,
he's Robert De Niro on set. So right. You know what I mean? Everybody's sort of everybody's reacting like this. I'm like, I don't know how I'd explain this to people listening, but I'm
But he is Bob. He is Bob. I thought it was cool when you got to you're calling him Bob suddenly.
Well, you have to call him Bob because that's his name. Right. It's weird if after a while you're calling him Mr. De Niro and you know him. So
or Robert.
But he, he was one of the producers on the movie too. So it was fun, and every moment was exciting. And again, got to work. Owen again was there, and we would share fun, moments with him there. There's a great outtake on the DVD or whatever the equivalent of the DVD is now. So
the extras,
when you get the extra features when you're streaming, of Owen cracking Bob up when he's talking about like Owen's asking me about my portfolio and something, and
Right.
he's just cracking Bob up, and it's so fun to see Bob laugh because everybody wants to make him laugh, because he's so. We just watched Heat the other night with Quinn.
Yeah.
And, I mean, my God, he's so good in that movie, and he's just so intimidating. So, when he cracks and he laughs, it's always like, that's the best feeling. So I would try to, do whatever I could to hopefully like try to make him laugh. But I, never really ever felt like, oh yeah, my buddy Bob.
But as
like,
a comedic partner, who knew?
Amazing.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
Knew? Like he's got comic chops. I mean,
he's really good. He's really funny.
Yeah.
And, and he's got amazing timing. And yeah, he's an actor that he's a movie star, but he really comes out of the world of being an actor, a guy, that's where he comes from. So like his first instinct is always to be there for the other actor, and he knows what's going to make a scene better is if he's there connecting with you, because as we all know, there are actors in the world who don't do that, or stars who don't necessarily give you everything when they're off camera, or that kind of thing. So
yeah, the best ones I find usually are. But I met Robert De Niro. Film I directed premiered at Tribeca, and we went to a filmmakers brunch, and I sat with him and Jane Rosenthal, and I could barely breathe, let alone try and make conversation with him. He's a shy guy.
He's very shy. Yeah. And but he's so sweet, and he's so loyal. He's so giving. And I mean, he's just always, he's, every once in a while I'll get an email, from him, like saying, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, oh man. And it's just, it makes me very happy.
That's what I love, Ben, is you've had a chance to work with so many of these people over the years, from the Tom Cruises to the Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, and you still, even growing up in show business, you still maintain this sort of this excitement around access to them. And that's what I love so much, is there's no sense of like, oh yeah, that's Robert. It's like, you're like, how sweet, I got a message from, and that's what it's about, right? Like just being able to, these people that staying humble. Yeah. Staying humble. And also like, you appreciate their work so much and love what they do. And just to have that, that sort of synergy. And I think it's, I've always found that to be such, because I come from Allentown, Pennsylvania. So any celebrity I saw when I started in show business was like the be all and end all. And I feel like that, I'm still that Allentown girl, but you are, you grew up in it and you still have that. And I love that about you.
Yeah. I mean, I will never stop being a fan of those people. And it's maybe because I was so into it as a kid too. And those movies meant so much to me growing up, that it means even more to me. So, and it's like you're saying, like the best really I do find are the most generous, people who really care about their work and happen to be incredibly, talented and incredibly successful. I find, definitely Tom Cruise and, Dustin, Bob, any of those people, it's like they love the work. They just love the work. And so that's what it's about for them. And yeah, oh my God, it's it's like a dream come true. I never want to get over that, because if you do, then, then you're in trouble if you're not excited to be able to actually be connecting with these people who, are so important in terms of inspiring, what I wanted to do. And it's and just watch. I love movies, so to be able to even go back now, as we've been since the pandemic with our kids watching movies, even watching White Squall, it's like, wow, like there's you can get so much. Jeff Bridges, any of it, like these, you see. So you said the work holds up, and going further back, it's just amazing to kind of watch the progression of what these people have done, and I think you can learn from it too a lot.
Yeah, well, staying humble, focusing on the work, and never losing that sort of like fascination with how the people around you and the talent around you is a great example. But Ben, you are in that echelon. I got to say, yes. I was thinking of, is there a director, actor whose work that I couldn't tell you which of your work I enjoyed and appreciated more. And I thought about it, and it was really you and Clint Eastwood.
Oh, wow.
I mean, both of your careers are so incredibly, have given so much to all of us, and we're going to wrap it up. But I mean,
I think Clint Eastwood is funnier.
and you're scarier. You're more dangerous.
Thanks, man. But I don't look at it that way. But I'm so happy to be doing what I love doing. And I think over the years, I've become more grateful for the opportunity to do it. Just like thinking about the 90s and thinking about that time, I'm sure you have this thing too, where at that time, you're not contextualizing it because you're young and you're just going with your instincts, right? And you're just going for it. And now, as we get older, looking back and really being able to appreciate the opportunities we had and what the opportunities we still have, and to be able to experience these people who meant so much to us, all that stuff. I think to have that appreciation now, I think being younger at that time, if you don't have it, you just don't, you're not supposed to have that. But I really feel like now I do more, and I feel good that I'm able to appreciate all that.
Yeah, and you're a great example for younger people that you saw step up for you and give people roles, and
definitely,
that.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that and to be aware of that you can in some way be supportive to anybody who's just like saying, hey, what do you think? Like, what should I do? How do I go forward? That's part of it for sure.
Dude, I can't thank you enough for being here, Christine. Are you impressed that I got him?
You landed. I mean, first White Squall and then Ben Stiller.
I'm doing all the work, Christine.
I know. No, this was so much fun because I don't think Ben. I mean, we've never done an interview like this, you and I.
I know. We should do it more often.
We should
Let's start our own podcast. We'll do like our own.
You guys could be the cutest, funniest couple on the planet, and
relationship podcast. You and me. By the way,
David, next time you're in New York or we're in LA, like you and Jill and we all have to have a dinner together.
And by the way,
meal.
Yes.
And David, kudos to you for landing Christine and getting her to do a podcast, because I think. Let's be truthful, right? Christine, you're not the biggest podcast person.
I've owned that. I said that. Okay. I think I had only listened to a couple of podcasts prior to David reaching out to me about this. So I am forever changed. I'm learning.
I'm so happy because
I
enjoy podcasts. I'm not like a crazy podcast freak because it's a little bit overwhelming because there's so many. But when Christine said she was going to do this, I was like, this is great because it's going to, bring you into the world of podcasts, and you'll see what's so cool about them. And I think what I find in the podcasts that I like the most, they're about something specific, but ultimately it's about the people who are doing the podcast, and they become people you just want to spend time with and listen to, and you feel connected to. And I feel like you guys already have that going on, and it's fun watching that develop. And I feel like even just by the first few episodes, it's so much about that, just people connecting with each other, because that's what's really fun. Like I listened to like the Pivot podcast with Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway. And like, I'm not into big tech or all that stuff, but I just enjoy listening to them talk and, their relationship. So it's really fun to listen to you guys, talk about that time, and also just like start to like, feel that, the connection you guys have as it goes on, because that's what people enjoy.
Oh, thank you so much, Ben. Yeah, I'm grateful to work with Christine because she really is the perfect partner. She can give a joke, she can take a joke, and as private as you are, I mean, you're not on social media. I mean, really, the only place anyone could find you is on this podcast, and I respect that. But when you're on the show, you were like, let's talk about everything and anything, like no holding back. This is our show. We're going to be honest and open, and it's so much fun to listen to because it's all, real, and that's why so that's great. Yeah, it's a
been
fun
so
show.
much fun.
This was a great episode.
You made our day, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.
You. Go
Thank
back
you.
to work now. Go,
Good. Yes,
All right.
congrats on Severance. Go make a
2.
good season 2.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
This was
Love
fun.
All
you.
right, thank you, Ben.
Bye. Love you too.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe and give us 5 stars.
And please follow us on Instagram at Hey Dude, the 90s Called. See you next time.